Brethren, welcome to Shabbat services, and over the past few weeks we've done the study series on the Nephilim, and we've also referred to the book of Genesis several times when we talked about Noah and the flood. And there's a statement that we find in the New Testament which says, as in the days of Noah. So what I'd like to do is to look at that statement and see what it really means to us, and see how that information affects us as the New Testament assembly in the time of the end. So let's start by turning to the Gospel of Matthew, and we'll go to Matthew chapter 24, and we will start in verse 36. Matthew 24, starting in verse 36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and did not know until the flood came, and took them all away. So also will be the coming of the Son of Man. Then two men will be in the fields, one will be taken and the other left. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour your master is coming. But know this, that if the master of the house had known what hour the thief would come, he would have watched and not allowed his house to be broken into. Therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. So this is where we find that phrase, as it says in verses 38 and 39. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came, and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So in the days of Noah they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage. And it then says, and they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So we have this concept of being taken, and the implication here is that being taken is a bad thing because the flood took them all away. And then let's carry on, and let's look at verses 40 and 41. And then it says, then shall two be in the field, the one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill, one shall be taken, and the other left. So again, we see the implication here that of these people, one is taken, one is left. And what we read in the previous verses, we were told the flood took them all away. So this would imply that being taken is a bad thing. You don't want to be taken. But let's have a look at another gospel, see if that gives us any more clarity. So let's turn forward to the Gospel of Luke, and we'll look at the parallel passage in Luke chapter 17. And this time we'll start in verse 20. Luke 17, starting in verse 20. Now when he was asked by the Pharisees, when the kingdom of the Mighty One would come, he answered them and said, the kingdom of the Mighty One does not come with observation, nor will they say, see here or see there, for indeed the kingdom of the Mighty One is within you. Then he said to the disciples, the days will come when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. And they will say to you, look here or look there. Do not go after them or follow them. For as the lightning that flashes out of one part under heaven shines to the other part under heaven, so also the Son of Man will be in his day. But first he must suffer many things, and be rejected by this generation. And as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall also be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, and they married wives. They were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark. And the flood came, and destroyed them all. Likewise, as it was also in the days of Lot, they ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out from Sodom, Jehovah rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so will it be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. In that day, he who is on the housetop, and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. I tell you, in that night there will be 2 men in one bed. One will be taken, the other will be left. 2 women will be grinding together. One will be taken, the other left. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken, the other left. And they answered and said to him, Where, Master? So he said to them, Wherever the body is, there the eagles will be gathered together. So again, we see in this parallel statement in the Gospel of Luke, again it talks about the days of Noah. And it says in verse 27, They did eat and drank, they married wives and were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Now if you remember in the Gospel of Matthew it said, And the flood came and took them all. So here in the Gospel of Luke we see this statement being revised to, And the flood came and destroyed them all. So again we see the implication here that being taken is to be destroyed. That would certainly seem to be the case from these first couple of scriptures. So let's see what we can make of this, and let's see whether that is a totally valid statement to make. Let's turn back to the book of Genesis, and we'll refer to the story of Lot, which obviously was mentioned in the Gospel of Luke there. So let's go to Genesis chapter 19, and we'll start in verse 12. Genesis 19, starting in verse 12. Then the men said to Lot, Have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters, and whoever you have in the city? Take them out of this place, for we will destroy this place, because the outcry against them has grown great before the face of Jehovah. And Jehovah has sent us to destroy it. So Lot went and spoke to his sons-in-law who had married his daughters, and said, Get up, get out of this place, for Jehovah will destroy this city. But his sons-in-law, he seemed to be joking. When the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, Arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. And while they lingered, the men took hold of his hand, his wife's hand, and the hand of his 2 daughters, Jehovah being merciful to him, and they brought him out to set him outside the city. So it came to pass, when they brought them outside, that he said, Escape for your life, do not look behind you, nor stay anywhere in the plain. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. Then Lot said to them, Please know, Jehovah, indeed now your servant has found favour in your sight, and you have increased your mercy which you have shown me by saving my life. But I cannot escape to the mountains, lest some evil overtake me and I die. See now, this city is near enough to flee to, and it is a little one. Please let me escape there. Is it not a little one? And my soul shall live. And he said to him, See, I have favoured you concerning this thing also, in that I will not overthrow the city for which you have spoken. Hurry, escape there, for I cannot do anything until you arrive there. Therefore the name of the city was called Zoar. The sun had risen upon the earth when Lot entered Zoar. Then Jehovah rained fire and brimstone on Sodom and Gomorrah from Jehovah out of the heavens. So he overthrew these cities in the plain, the inhabitants of the cities, and whatever grew on the ground. But his wife looked back behind him, and she became a pillar of salt. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before Jehovah. And he looked toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and toward all the land of the plain. And he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land which went up like the smoke of a furnace. And it came to pass, when the Mighty One destroyed the cities of the plain, that the Mighty One remembered Abraham, and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had dwelt. So, in this story, we hear a couple of points. In verse 12 it said, Then the men said to Lot, have you anyone else here, son-in-law, your sons, your daughters? And whomever you have in the city, take out of this place. So here the concept of being taken out is a positive thing. They're being taken out of the city before destruction falls on the city. And in verse 15 it says this, when the morning dawned, the angels urged Lot to hurry, saying, arise, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, lest you be consumed in the punishment of the city. So again, the concept here of being taken out was a positive thing. They were being taken out lest they be consumed in the punishment of the city. And in verse 25 it says, then Jehovah rained brimstone and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. So after those who were being spared were taken out of harm's way, then Jehovah rained brimstone and fire on the city. So here we have a different interpretation. In the first scriptures, to be taken seemed to indicate that you were destroyed in the wrath, but here being taken seems to indicate that they were taken out of the way of punishment. They were taken out of harm's way. So we seem to have a split decision here. Is there any other scriptures that help us come to a decision? Well, let's turn to 2 Kings and let's see if there's another description that we can use here. 2 Kings chapter 2, and we will start in verse 1. And it came to pass, when Jehovah was about to take up Elijah into heaven by the whirlwind, that Elijah went with Elisha from Gilgal. Then Elijah said to Elisha, stay here, please, for Jehovah has sent me on to Bethel. But Elisha said, as Jehovah lives, and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So they went down to Bethel. Now the sons of the prophets who were at Bethel came out to Elisha and said to him, do you know that Jehovah will take away your master from you today? And he said, yes, I know, keep silent. Then Elijah said to him, Elisha, stay here, please, for Jehovah has sent me on to Jericho. But he said, as Jehovah lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So they came to Jericho. Now the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho came out to Elisha and said to him, do you know that Jehovah will take away your master from you today? So he answered, yes, I know, keep silent. Then Elijah said to him, stay here, please, for Jehovah has sent me on to the Jordan. But he said, as Jehovah lives and as your soul lives, I will not leave you. So the 2 of them went on. And 50 men of the sons of the prophets went and stood facing them at a distance, while the 2 of them stood by the Jordan. Now Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water, and it was divided this way and that, so that the 2 of them crossed over on dry ground. And so it was, when they had crossed over, that Elijah said to Elisha, ask, what may I do for you, before I am taken away from you? Elisha said, please let a double portion of your spirit be upon me. So he said, you have asked a hard thing. Nevertheless, if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so for you, but if not, it shall not be so. Then it happened as they continued on and taught, that suddenly a chariot of fire appeared, with horses of fire, and separated the 2 of them. And Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven. And Elijah saw it, and he cried out, my father, the chariot of Israel and its horsemen. So he saw him no more, and he took hold of his own clothes and tore them in 2 pieces. He also took up the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him, and went back and stood by the bank of the Jordan. Then he took the mantle of Elijah that had fallen from him, and struck the water, and said, where is Jehovah, mighty one of Elijah? And when he also had struck the water, it was divided this way and that, and Elisha crossed over. Now when the sons of the prophets who were from Jericho saw him, they said, the spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha. And they came to meet him, and bowed to the ground before him. So here we see this concept of being taken up. In verse 9 it says, and it came to pass when they were gone over, that Elijah said unto Elisha, ask what I shall do for thee before I am taken away from thee. And Elisha said, I pray thee, let a double portion of thy spirit be upon me. So here we see Elijah preparing to be taken away. And again, as we saw from the story, this was a positive thing. He was taken up into heaven. So we seem to have two options. In some cases, being taken meant to be taken to destruction, to be taken in the flood. And in other cases, we see that being taken was a positive thing. They were taken out of harm's way. Lot and his family were taken out of Sodom and Gomorrah. Elijah was taken up into heaven. So this concept of being taken needs further investigation. But obviously this is one of the foundational concepts of the rapture doctrine. And for the majority of Christians who adhere to the rapture doctrine, their belief is that before the tribulation they will be taken to heaven, so they don't have to go through the tribulation. And that is the primary doctrine of most what would be known as pre-tribulation rapturists. So let's look at the scripture and see if this concept of being taken into heaven before the tribulation actually is a valid understanding. So please turn back to Matthew 24, and this time we will start in verse 1. Matthew 24, and we'll start in verse 1. Then Yehoshua went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came up to show him the buildings of the temple. And Yehoshua said to them, Do you not see all these things? Assuredly I say to you, not one stone shall be left here upon another, that shall not be thrown down. Now as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately, saying, Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming, and of the end of the age? And Jehoshua answered and said to them, Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and will deceive many. And you will hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that you are not troubled at all, for these things must come to pass before, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famine, pestilence, and earthquake in various places. All these things are the beginning of sorrows. Then they will deliver you to tribulation, and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And then many will be offended, and betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all the nations, and then the end will come. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the set-apart place, whoever reads, let him understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of his house, and let him who is in the field not go back to get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant, and to those who are nursing babies in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in winter, or on the Sabbath. For then there will be great tribulation, such has not been since the beginning of the world, until this time, no, nor ever shall be. And unless those days were shortened, no flesh would be saved. But for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Then if anyone says to you, Look, here is the Messiah, or there, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders, to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, Look, he is in the desert, do not go out. Or look, he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as the lightning comes from the east and flashes to the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. Immediately after the tribulation of these days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven. Then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven, in power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, And they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So, let us look at some of these statements and see how we can use these to help us validate the rapture doctrine. Matthew 24 will start in verse 7. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of sorrow. Then they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you will be hated by all nations for my name's sake. So we see that kingdom rising against kingdom is happening today. We read the news, we see the fighting that's happening in the Middle East, we see the fighting that's happening in the Ukraine, we see the tension between North and South Korea, we see nations rising against nation. We hear of famines, we hear of pestilence. I mean, the last report I saw was that the Ebola virus was now getting out of control in parts of Africa, which is a particularly deadly blood-transmitted virus, and earthquakes in various places, and we see more and more earthquakes hitting across the world. But it says, these are the beginning of sorrows. This is not the tribulation, this is the beginning. These are the warning signs at the beginning. And it says, they will deliver you up to tribulation and kill you, and you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. And if you read what's happening with the Middle East, the persecution of Christians now is getting out of hand in Iraq, in Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, North Africa. The murder and the persecution of Christians is becoming out of control, and yet the West turns a blind eye to this tragedy. But these are the beginning of sorrows. In verses 14 and 15 we're told this: And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When you therefore seek the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the set apart place. So here we see two things. The gospel will be preached to all the world. Now, with what's going on in the Middle East, it's extremely dangerous, extremely difficult to preach the Christian gospel. You're not even allowed to have Bibles in Saudi Arabia. Christian churches have been bulldozed and burnt in Iraq, Iran, in Syria, in places in North Africa, and it is becoming extremely dangerous to profess the Christian faith in many places. So to have the ability to stand up and preach the gospel must require divine intervention, because if somebody were to stand up in the middle of Iran or Iraq today and try and preach the Christian gospel, they would be arrested and immediately taken off for imprisonment and probably torture, if not execution. So something must happen between now and then to allow this gospel to be preached throughout the whole world. And also we see this statement: when therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation. Now the abomination of desolation happened the first time with Antiochus Epiphanes. This is when the Greek conqueror came in and took over Jerusalem, forbid Jewish worship, and forbid circumcision of the male children, forbid the reading of Torah, and indeed set up animal sacrifice in the temple, and started by sacrificing a pig on the altar in the temple of Jehovah. So the abomination of desolation, we have a physical model, and we are told, look for this to come again. Now what that means is somehow there needs to be a temple, or at least an altar, so that there can be sacrificial worship and there can be sacrifice. So something dramatic has to happen in the Middle East between now and then to allow this altar, to allow this temple to be prepared. But then it says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. And so we need to have discernment between general tribulation. It says, and you will go into tribulation and be killed for my name's sake. And then it says there'll be tribulation such as the world has never seen. This is what's called the Great Tribulation. And if it says immediately after the tribulation, that's talking about the Great Tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. So the abomination of desolation and the Great Tribulation tie together in this end time context. So how does that come together, and how does that help us? Well, let's turn to the book of Revelation and let us understand how these events start to come together. Revelation 11, and we'll start in verse 1. Then I was given a reed like a measuring rod, and the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of the Mighty One, the altar, and those who worship there. But leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will tread the set-apart city underfoot for 42 months. And I will give my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy 1,260 days, clothed in sackcloth. These are the 2 olive trees that stand before the lampstand, standing before Jehovah of the earth. And if anyone wants to harm them, then fire proceeds from their mouth and devours their enemies. And if anyone wants to harm them, he must be killed in this manner. They have power to shut up the heavens so that no rain falls on the days of their prophecy. And they have power over waters to turn them to blood and to strike the earth with all plagues as often as they desire. When they finish their testimony, the beast will ascend out of the bottomless pit and will make war against them, overcome them and kill them. And their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt. There also our Master was crucified. Then those from the people, tribes, tongues, and nations will see their dead bodies 3.5 days, and not allow their dead bodies to be put into graves. And those who dwell on the earth will rejoice over them, make merry, and send gifts to one another, because these 2 prophets tormented those who dwell on the earth. Now after the 3.5 days, the breath of life from the Mighty One entered them, and they stood on their feet, and great fear fell on those who saw them. And they heard a loud voice from heaven saying to them, Come up here. And they ascended to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies saw them. In the same hour there was a great earthquake, and 1/10 of the city fell. In the earthquake 7,000 people were killed, and the rest were afraid, and gave the glory to the Mighty One of heaven. The second woe is past. Behold, the third woe is coming quickly. Then the 7th angel sounded, and there were loud voices in heaven saying, The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Master and his Messiah, and he shall reign for ever and ever. So, what does the story of the 2 witnesses tell us? Well, firstly this, in verse 2, But the court which is without the temple leave out and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles, and the set-apart city shall be tread under foot 42 months. So when we think about the abomination of desolation, we see that the false prophet and the beast power will set themselves up in the temple of Jehovah, proclaiming that he is the Mighty One, that he is God. And it says the outer court will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles. So the holy place, the sacred place, will be profaned by the Gentiles, by the beast power. And it says they shall tread the city underfoot for 42 months. So here we see that 3.5-year period of the tribulation. In verse 11 it says, And after 3.5 days the Spirit of life from the Mighty One entered into them, and they stood upon their feet, and great fear fell upon them which saw them. So after this 3.5-year period, after the 1260 days of their prophecy, of their ministry, they are killed, and then 3.5 days later they are resurrected. The Spirit of life entered into them, and they are resurrected. And then it says they were taken up into heaven. And then the final thing was in verse 15 was said, And the 7th angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven. So this all ties into the narrative of the book of Revelation. We know there are 7 seals. We know there are 7 trumpets. We know there are 7 bowls of wrath. And here we see that after the 2 witnesses are resurrected, then the 7th trumpet sounds. And that's a really important piece of information, because that allows us to tie together multiple pieces of prophetic information. So let's go back to the book of Corinthians, and let us understand how all of this information comes together so we can clearly identify the timing of the rapture and how that fits into the end time narrative. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, and we'll start in verse 50. Now this I say, brethren, that flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of the mighty one, nor does corruption inherit incorruption. Behold, I tell you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. For this corruptible must put on incorruption, and the mortal must put on immortality. So when this corruptible has put on incorruption, and this mortal has put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass this saying that is written, Death is swallowed up in victory. O death, where is your sting? O Hades, where is your victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to the Mighty One, who gives us the victory through our Master, Yahushua Messiah. Therefore, my beloved brethren, be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work of Yehovah, knowing that your labour is not in vain to Yehovah. So in verse 52 it says this, in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So what have we heard? We've heard that after the two witnesses are resurrected, then the seventh angel shall trump. The final of the seven trumpets shall be sounded. We hear in the book of Corinthians that at the last trump, the dead shall be raised. This is the resurrection of the dead. And we saw in Matthew said, Yahushua said, I will return with the sound of a great trumpet. So all of these events come together. The end of the ministry of the two witnesses, the 3.5-year period of the Great Tribulation, the 1260 days of their witness, their resurrection, the return of Yahushua, and the resurrection of the dead, all come together at this single point in the end time narrative. So that's talking about the resurrection of the dead. Does that fully answer the question as to the rapture? Well, that would seem to, because the mainstream doctrine is that the church will be raptured away before the tribulation. Well, obviously, from what we've read in Scripture, that can't possibly be the case, because the resurrection of the dead happens at the final trump. This is after the tribulation. This is after the 3.5 years. So, is there anything else that could be construed as the rapture, or is there anything else that we can understand about what is going on in this end time period? Well, let's turn back to the book of Revelation, and let us have a look and see what events occur during this 3.5-year period. Revelation 13, and we will start in verse 1. Then I stood on the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rising out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, his feet were like that of a bear, and his mouth was the mouth of a lion. The dragon great gave him his power, his throne, and great authority. And I saw one of the heads as if it had been mortally wounded, and his deadly wound was healed. And all the world marvelled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And he was given a mouth, speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months. Then he opened his mouth in blasphemy against the Mighty One, to blaspheme his name, his tabernacle, and those who dwell in heaven. And it was granted to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given to him over every tribe, tongue, and nation. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb, slain from the foundation of the world. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and faith of the saints. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb and spoke like a dragon. And he exercises all authority of the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. He performs great signs, so that he makes fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling them who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who was wounded by the sword and lived, and was granted power to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast to be killed. He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive the mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. His number is 666. So in verses 5 and 7 we're told this: And there was given unto him power, speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him to continue 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against the Mighty One, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints, and to overcome them. And power was given to him over all kindred and tongues and nations. So this beast power has authority to continue for 42 months. This is the same period, 3.5 years, 42 months, 1260 days. It's all the same period. It said he blasphemed against the Mighty One, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle. So here we see the relationship between the beast power and the abomination of desolation. He is blaspheming the tabernacle of Jehovah. He sets himself up in the temple of the Mighty One and proclaims that he is God. And it also says he was given unto him power to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So this beast has the power to overcome and to kill the saints. And in verse 15 it says, And he has power to give life to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak, and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. So here we see this beast power. He has authority for 42 months. He blasphemes the temple of Jehovah. He makes war over the saints, and he has authority to kill all of those who do not worship the image of the beast. So how does that help us put all of these things together in end-time prophecy? Turn back just a couple of pages to Revelation chapter 7. And we'll start in verse 9. Revelation 7, starting in verse 9. After these things I looked, and behold, a great multitude which no one could number, of all nations, tribes, peoples, and tongues, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palm branches in their hands, and crying out with a loud voice, saying, Salvation belongs to our Mighty One, who sits on the throne, and to the Lamb. And the angels stood around the throne, and the elders and the 4 living creatures, and fell on their faces before the throne, and worshipped the Mighty One, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom, thanksgiving and honour and power and might be to our Mighty One for ever and ever. Amen. Then one of the elders who answered, saying to me, Who are these arrayed in white robes, and where do they come from? And I said to him, Sir, you know. So he said to me, These are the ones who come out of the great tribulation, and washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore they are before the throne of the Mighty One, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. They shall neither hunger any more, nor shall thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them, and lead them to living fountains of water, and the Mighty One will wipe away every tear from their eyes. So in verse 9 we're told, "And I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and peoples and tongues, stood before the throne, and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hand. A great multitude which no man could number, standing before the throne." And where did these people come from? Verse 14. "And I said unto him, Sir, thou knowest. And he said to me, These are they which came out of great tribulation, and have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." So this group, this great multitude, stood before the throne, are those who were executed for their witness to Yehoshua. They would not give up their faith in the face of the beast power. They would not recant. They held on to their Christian beliefs to the cost of their lives. But these people, when they come up to the throne, and we know from previous studies, they don't go straight to heaven, they wait for the resurrection. No one ascends to heaven until after the resurrection. But at that time, these people, this great multitude who come, or this multitude who come out of the great tribulation, from all nations and people and tongues, are the ones who held fast to their Christian faith during the time of end-time persecution. And we see this beginning. We see tribulation beginning in the Middle East with the attacks on the Christian churches and the Christian communities. So Islam is beginning to fulfill this requirement of the tribulation of the Christian people. And it says they washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. So they held on to their faith even unto the point of death, and as such at the resurrection stand before Yehovah to serve him day and night in the temple. So this is one group of people that we hear about. Let's turn back to Luke 17 and let's see if we can get any other discernment. Luke 17, and we will start in verse 31. "In that day, he who is on the housetop, and his goods are in the house, let him not come down to take them away. And likewise the one who is in the field, let him not turn back. Remember Lot's wife. Whoever seeks to save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life will preserve it. I tell you, in that night there will be 2 men in one bed. One will be taken, the other will be left. 2 women will be grinding together. One will be taken, the other left. 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken, and the other left. And they answered and said to him, Where, Master? And he said to them, Wherever the body is, there the eagles will be gathered together." So there's 2 things that we need to address with this scripture. If we see, it says, one shall be taken, the other left. 1 in bed, 2 in bed, one shall be taken, the other left. 2 women grinding together, one shall be taken, the other left. 2 men in the field, one shall be taken, the other left. So depending on how we understand the meaning of being taken, either they're taken to destruction or they are taken out of the path of destruction, and we need to answer that question. But also notice the 3 scenarios. 2 people were asleep, which would indicate it's night time. 2 people were grinding corn. Typically the women would grind the corn early in the morning, ready to make bread for the day's work. And 2 men were in the field harvesting the crops, so that's during the daytime. So we see here that this event of being taken seems to happen across all time zones simultaneously. At night in one part of the world, at morning in another part of the world, and in the afternoon in another part of the world. So this looks like a spontaneous event happening across the globe at a single time. But then the question is, and they answered and said unto him, Where, Master? And he said unto them, wherever so the body is, thither will the eagles be gathered together. So where is this body? Where do we find the body of Messiah at this time? Well, again, let's turn back to the book of Revelation and let's look there for the answer. Revelation 12, and we'll start in verse 1. Now a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet, and on her head a garland of 12 stars. Then being with child she cried out in labour and in pain to give birth. And another sign appeared in heaven, behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail drew 1/3 of the stars of heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, who was ready to give birth, to devour her child as soon as it was born. She bore a male child, who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up to the Mighty One and his throne. Then the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by the Mighty One, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon of old was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice, saying in heaven, Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our Mighty One and the power of his Messiah have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our Mighty One, day and night, has been cast down. And they overcame them by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death. Therefore rejoice, O heaven, and you who dwell in them. Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and the sea. For the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, because he knows that he has a short time. Now when the dragon saw that he had been cast to the earth, he persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. But the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times and half a time, from the presence of the serpent. So the serpent spewed water out of his mouth like a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away by the flood. But the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up its mouth and swallowed up the flood, with which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, and he went to make war with the rest of her offspring, who keep the commandments of the Mighty One, and have the testimony of Yahushua Messiah. So, what does this scripture tell us? Well, in verse 6, the woman fled into the wilderness, where she had a place prepared for the Mighty One, that they should feed her there 1,260 days. Here we see again this 1,260 days. Now some people have tried to make a case that this is the church in the wilderness years after the 1st century, when the church basically disappeared from the scene. Some have tried to make a case that this is the church basically hiding out for 1,260 years before the Anabaptist revival. That could be an interpretation, but I think there's too much commonality between the 3.5 years, the 42 months, the 1,260 days. This seems all to be referring to the same time period. So it says the woman fled to the wilderness. Remember the question that disciples asked, where? When they are taken, one is taken, one is left. Where are they taken? Well, there's an indication here that the woman that represents the church is taken into the wilderness for 1,260 days. In verse 14 it says this, And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times and half a time from the face of the serpent. Remember what it said in the statement in Luke, wherever you see, where the body is, there you shall see the eagles gathered. Here it says she was given the wings of an eagle, that she might fly to the wilderness, to her place, where she is nourished for time, times and half a time. Again, this 3.5 year period is mentioned here. So it seems to be that the physical church that is on the earth at the time of the end will be taken to some place of safety, some physical place in the wilderness where they are protected from Satan, it says, where she might fly into the wilderness, where she is nourished for a time, times and half a time from the face of the serpent. And in verses 16 and 17 we're told this, And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened up her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of the Mighty One, and have the testimony of Yahushua Messiah. So if you think about the similarity between this event and crossing the Red Sea, in that case Moses parted the Red Sea, the people of Israel crossed through, and then as the armies of Egypt went to pursue them, the Red Sea closed in on them and killed them all. Here we see the church. So Israel is often considered to be the woman, the precursor to the New Testament church. Here we see the woman, the physical members of this church, of this assembly, in this place of safety. Satan inspires human beings, this flood of people, to come and to attempt to destroy this woman and the church. And it says the earth opened up her mouth, and we think about a massive earthquake separating, opening up and capturing all of this army, all of this mass of people that Satan has inspired to come against the people. And it says it swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And we see the parallel between that and crossing the Red Sea. And then it says, and the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed. So this event happens at the beginning of the tribulation period. So it would appear that some people of the physical church are taken to a place of safety, but that's not in heaven. That is here on earth, in this place of safety, where they are protected from Satan, from his armies, for a 3.5-year period. But it also says, and he went to make war with the remnant of her seed. So there are more people who are left on the earth. Let's go back to Revelation 7 and let's see who some of these other people could be. Just a couple of pages. And Revelation 7, and we will start reading in verse 1. After these things I saw 4 angels at the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds of the earth, that the wind should not blow on the earth, on the sea, or on any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the east, having the seal of the living Mighty One. And he cried with a loud voice to the 4 angels to whom it was granted to harm the earth and the sea, saying, do not harm the earth, the sea, or the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Mighty One on their foreheads. And I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 of the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. So here we have another group being identified. And let's look at the characteristics of this group. In verse 1 it says, I saw the 4 angels standing on the 4 corners of the earth, holding the 4 winds. So this group of people appears to be scattered over all the earth, just as we saw with the story of the people who were in bed or grinding corn or working in the fields. This is happening across all the earth at the same time. In verse 3 it says, saying, hurt not the earth, neither the sea nor the trees, till we have sealed the servants of our Mighty One on their foreheads. And these servants of the Mighty One are sealed on their foreheads. And then it says the angel is able to hurt the earth. And if we know our scripture, Revelation chapters 8 and 9 talks about the trumpet plagues. These are the plagues. This is where the earth itself, the trees are burnt up, the grass is burnt up, the waters turn to blood. The devastation comes upon the earth, and these are supernatural events. We also know that the trumpet plague, the 5th trumpet plague, lets the demons out of the abyss. We spoke about this last week. And they roamed the earth for 5.5 months, tormenting mankind. So we can see here that Jehovah is preparing a people. He is sealing them on their forehead, people across the whole globe, so that they are able to withstand this period of supernatural destruction that comes on the earth for this 3.5-year period. And let's look at the significance of being sealed on their foreheads. Let's turn forward to Revelation 14. And let's look at how significant it is that this group of people is sealed on their forehead. Revelation 14, and we'll start in verse 1. Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven, like the voice of many waters, and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps, and they sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the four living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn that song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These are redeemed from men, firstfruits to the Mighty One and to the Lamb. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of the Mighty One. So here we see those who are sealed on their foreheads. In verse 1 it says, "A lamb stood on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000, having his father's name written on their foreheads." So the angel seals the 144,000 by writing the name of Yehovah on their forehead. That protects them and precludes them taking the mark of the beast. Because remember where the mark of the beast is put, on the forehead or on the right hand. So those who are sealed cannot take the mark of the beast. They are protected from this beast power. And look at the reason why this group of people is protected. In verse 3 it says, "And they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts. No man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth." This new song, remember we've heard the song of Moses, we hear the Psalm of David. This new song is the final understanding of Scripture. It's the final understanding of the word of the Mighty One. And Yehovah is preparing 144,000 people from the tribes of Israel. Remember, the great multitude were from all nations, all peoples, all tribes and all tongues. They died for their witness, for holding on to their Christian faith. But the 144,000 are from the tribes of Israel. They have specifically been chosen and prepared to learn this new song, to tell the word of Yehovah, to preach the gospel to all the world, so that then the end may come. And so this group of people have a very specific purpose, and they are supernaturally protected by being sealed with the name of Yehovah during this tribulation period. And if we continue down to the bottom of this chapter, to Revelation 14, starting in verse 14. "Then I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and on his hand a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sits on the cloud, 'Thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe.' So he who sat on the cloud thrust in the sickle in the earth, and the earth was reaped. And another angel came out of the temple, which is in heaven, he also having a sharp sickle. And another angel came out of the altar, who had power over fire, and cried with a loud voice to him who had the sharp sickle, saying, 'Thrust in your sharp sickle, and gather the clusters of the vine of the earth, for her grapes are fully ripe.' So the angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and threw it into the great winepress of the wrath of the Mighty One. And the winepress was trampled outside the city, and blood came out of the winepress up to the horses' bridles, 1,600 furlongs." So in verses 14 and 15 it says, "One sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle." And it says, "Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." Remember last week we talked about the tares, the wheat and the tares. The harvest is ripe. Yehoshua is reaping his harvest. These are those who are faithful and true, who are being prepared for resurrection, the first resurrection, the resurrection of reward. And then those who are gathered in later, it says in 19 and 20, "gathered the vine of the earth and cast it into the great winepress of the wrath of the Mighty One. And the winepress was trodden to the city, and blood came out, even to the horses' bridles, by the space of 1,600 furlongs." That's 200. This river of blood will flow for 200 miles. So we can see that in the end time, now we have more clarity, now we have more understanding. The vast majority of humankind, our understanding of Revelation is that 90% of humankind is killed during this period. There is a group of people who hold fast to their faith. They die because of their faith, their Christian faith, and they are resurrected. It looks like in the first resurrection to the throne of the Mighty One, and it says they shall go out no more. There shall be no more tears, nor pain, nor crying, for the Mighty One will wipe away every tear. These are the ones whose faith is tested through the tribulation. This is a great multitude from all people and all nations. The church, those who are in the assemblies, those who can be discerned as being faithful and true, but are maybe not from the tribes of Israel, are maybe not fully qualified for the duty of the 144,000, are protected in a place of safety in the wilderness. And there they are nurtured and protected from Satan the devil for a period of 3.5 years. And then the 144,000 are specifically chosen from the 12 tribes of Israel. They are sealed on their forehead so they can be on the earth during this time of tribulation. They are protected from the supernatural plagues. They are protected from the destruction of the earth. They are protected from the mark of the beast. And they go across the earth for 3.5 years preaching the word of Jehovah, so that all the world may hear, so that when Yehoshua comes, nobody can say, your judgment isn't fair, no one told me. These men, or these people, these 144,000, are preaching the true word of Jehovah without any embellishment, without any corruption, without any misunderstanding. They learn the new song, they learn the pure truth of Jehovah, and they preach it across the world, so that at the day of judgment no one can say, this isn't fair, no one told us. And so we see these groups of people, but we also see that nowhere is anyone raptured straight to heaven. No one is taken completely out of the tribulation. There is a group of people who go through the tribulation, and their faith is tested by dying for their faith. There is a group of people who go through the tribulation but are protected in a place of safety. These are the church, whose works and whose attitude has already qualified them for this divine protection. And there is the 144,000 specifically chosen from the tribes of Israel, who are miraculously protected by the sealing on their forehead, who then go and preach the word of Jehovah for 3.5 years before he returns and before the time of the end. So, brethren, when we think about, as in the days of Noah, we think about those who are taken, let us make sure that we are not taken to destruction. Let us make sure that we do not have to go into tribulation to prove our faith through being executed. Let us make sure that we are suitably visible to Jehovah for our faith and our beliefs and our behavior, that we either are numbered in the children of the woman who are protected in the desert miraculously for 3.5 years from Satan the devil, or we are given the honor and the blessing of being numbered among the 144,000 to learn that new song, to go across the face of the earth to preach his word, so that all the world may hear the gospel, and then Yehoshua himself may come. Amen.